In my zone, in zone 7, we are approaching the fall. And fall is just right around the corner, and so is winter. And so I'm going to give you a quick garden tour so that you can see what is going on, but also some things that I know that you might need to start considering as you're approaching the winter months and the fall months so that you can still get a head start in your spring garden. So in this video, we're going to slightly touch on that. So come along with me as we walk through the garden and talk about these few things. One of the things are a lot of your herbs. If you're growing herbs or any medicinal herbs, like I have feverfew, I had basil, I had cilantro, all kinds of herbs. But mainly right now, I'm just looking at some of my feverfew, and then I have a few other herbs as well. But even the flowers, look how spent they are. So basically, like I had these looking beautiful, and I did not harvest them. But a lot of times, you know, you could deadhead them, clip them off. Sometimes you can even save the seeds if you want to. It's a feverfew. See that? You can save, you can save seeds. You know, I'm sprinkling. If I was sprinkle, it'll probably grow something later on. This was a zinnia. And so there's zinnias. Now, if you take the time, you can even harvest your flowers once they're spent. Look, I'm just dropping it. Let it go. You don't want to do that, really. You really want to take time to kind of organize, unless you don't mind things just growing anywhere. Take a look at a lot of your herbs and see if they are spent, and see if there are seeds, because you could save the seeds and you can save them for next year. So when it's time to replant them, or you might want to sprinkle them in certain areas and just allow it to just grow freely. In this particular area, I am planning on planting some annual flower cool bulbs. That's what I want to plant in this area, because I want to be alerted and notified when the springtime is coming. And I see these beautiful daffodils around in my community, and I just think it's absolutely gorgeous. I have never planted annual flowers bulbs during this fall time, but this year I'm ready for it. And this is something that you might be considering. So you want to think of a place where you want to put it. You can plant your bulbs along maybe fence lines. You could plant them around a tree, around this perimeter of the fountain, this area where a lot of my perennial herbs and flowers and a lot of medicinal things are. That's where I'm going to put these bulbs. So I'm going to plant my daffodils. There are some yellow, white ones, and then also some tulips. So this is the time when you want to consider what you want to plant, because they will bloom in the spring. As we're walking through the garden, you notice that it's really going to sleep. A lot of things are just starting to die out. It's time right now to clear out whatever you need to. Let me show you another thing that I need to harvest today. These are some lettuce seeds that have basically gone to seed. They flowered. They were beautiful flowers to look at, and now the seeds are sitting in there. If a wind were to catch it, they would just float away and just go. But I'm going to take the time to harvest them today so that I can save them, so I can plant them again in the spring. This is broadleaf feather lettuce. My tomato plants are still producing fruit. The birds are eating the ones that are on the outside of this protective barrier that I have. And this is an indeterminate tomato plant. So as you're thinking about for next year what you want to plant, you may want to consider where would you want to put an indeterminate plant that will keep continually giving you a harvest throughout the growing season, pretty much until it gets cold, past the fall time as it approaches winter. I can have this plant keep going until the first frost. And obviously it does not do well in the cool temperatures, but it will keep producing fruit. But you want to consider those kinds of things. This tomato plant is going up a cattle panel trellis, and that's how it's growing. But you want to consider that. Where would you put your determinate or indeterminates? And if you're planting in containers, you can still do a lot of this stuff in containers. Just notice I have pots all over in my garden areas. So if you do not have a large growing space, you can still plant in pots. Now, I know I do have a lot of big, garden space of growing, but you can have a pot and then maybe get a small little support cage that will go right into the pot, and you can still plant something that vines up that. So don't limit yourself at all thinking that you don't have a space, or whether you're on a patio, a balcony, or just a small garden area, you can still grow a lot of food in a small space. Many of you, I'm sure, have started maybe planting some things in the fall. This year, I made a little bit of change. For myself, I am not planning to plant a fall or winter garden. I actually move my garden basically inside, and I grow hydroponically. I like to throughout the year, but in the summer I just don't get that much time to manage both the inside and the outdoor garden. But I will be starting hydroponically growing all my lettuces, kale, a lot of my leafy greens, type things like that, and herbs and microgreens. But some of you are planting in raised beds and containers in the fall time so that you can still have maybe like a winter harvest or at the end of fall type harvest. But right now what I have going on in my garden is just still a lot of peppers. You may have your peppers. Now's a good time to start harvesting those peppers, hanging them up, drying them up, maybe putting them in a dehydrator, maybe freezing them or just eating them, so that they could be preserved, because you may be getting a lot of peppers that are growing at the same time and more than that you actually need. So it's time to really do preservation of your foods. Now, in the fall, you will get a bunch of things that are starting to harvest, ready to harvest. And so you have to really consider around this time, how are you going to preserve the food that you have? Because if you get a bunch of things at one time, you're either going to have to share it, freeze it, preserve it, can it, do something with it. For myself, I am going to be doing a lot of freezing, drying. I haven't gotten into canning yet, but that is one of my goals. I need to learn how to can, but I am going to do that. So in here, you will find a lot of pepper plants, both hot and not hot plants. But also here, I've got an Egyptian spinach plant that I need to go ahead and harvest all the leaves, the green leaves. What I'm planning on doing is blanching them. Blanching basically is when you harvest all the leaves and then you put it in boiling water. You boil it out for about 2 to 3 minutes at most. And then you take it out and you put it in some ice cold water. Maybe there's ice cubes in there, really cold. And it just pretty much stops that process stops the process. It preserves it, and it really keeps the color really nicely when you do freeze it, and the flavor and all that. And so I really like blanching greens, and it tastes so good when you are ready to use them, especially when you want to put in soups or sautés. You can still use it as you normally would. The peppers I have over here are cayenne peppers. Now I want to make sure I don't get my finger all up in there, but cayenne peppers are really great, especially during this time, because when we get sick or we feel a cough, a cold, something that's going on, our immune system is low, this is really helpful if you want to add it into, what do I call my flu balm type thing, ginger, garlic, lemon. I put thyme, I put cinnamon and cayenne pepper. And so I really want to preserve this so that I have that for those kinds of situations. So one thing I'm learning about, which is still new for me, are fruit trees and fruit plants. I've got blueberries here. I don't even know if I did well. Honestly, I think I did horrible this year, but we will see what happens next year. But you got to think about pruning and cutting back your plants and pruning it. So that is something that I need to learn about. I can't really give you any advice on that, but just something to be aware of. Do some research on that. Maybe speak with someone that is experienced in that, as far as how to prune back plants when they need to be. They could be pruned back at the end of your fall season or at the beginning of spring. I just haven't gotten to that yet and dived deep into my research on it, but that is something that needs to be done. I also have strawberry plants here that are bearing really lovely, to be honest. I have ever-bearing strawberries on this side, and then these ones were like June-bearing. The June-bearing leaves are just so full. But I know at some point I'll probably need to cut them back. I will need to cut them back because they are perennials down to the, not all the way down to the crown, but just much smaller. So they don't have to do all that in the springtime. And then lemongrass. Make sure you are watching my videos, because you know how I am with my lemongrass. I had lemongrass tea yesterday. I was singing. I was at a concert. It was so good. It tastes, oh my gosh, so good. If you've never planted lemongrass, consider that for your growing season. If you're still in hot weather, like you're in Florida or in the tropics, or another part of the world where it's still going to be actually a warm season for you throughout these months, all the way to December or November, January, whenever it is, plant some lemongrass. Trust me, you won't regret it. It is a very great tasting tea. And then you can harvest down to the, what's it called? Down to, it's not called the stem. I can't think of the word, but down to the bottom, the root part. I can't remember what it's called right now, but you get what I'm trying to say. You can cook with it, okay? I can't think of the word, but plant some lemongrass. The other thing are watermelons. So I gave away actually one of my watermelons to somebody. I was gonna show it to you over here, but I still have a little baby watermelon that's growing. Like, I have harvested maybe 15 little, they're not just regular sized watermelon, but sugar baby watermelons. Here's a baby one that just popped up in the past week, but they just keep popping up surprisingly. And then you can see that there are flowers still in this bed of watermelons. I have watermelons growing in raised beds. They're growing in ground and through arched trellises. So watermelons can grow in different places. So don't even let that stop you. If you have a small space where you're growing, you're like, all I have is a container or a couple of containers, you're on a patio, set up a little something where it can be supported just a little, or just let it run free, and it will still produce you some watermelon. You just want to make sure that you have a good soil makeup for it so that it can be enriched, have the nutrients, and watered well, because they will drink up all the water. They're very thirsty plants. Weeding is another thing that you want to be mindful of as well. Now, these are not weeds. These are actually from the hyssop herb plant that I had that basically reseeded itself. And so if I do not want to have 50 hyssop plants that are growing right here, I will need to pull them up and do that, okay? I'm leaving some here because I do want another hyssop plant. Let me pull another one. Oh, this is actually some thyme. And so things like that you want to go ahead and do. Thyme tastes good. That tastes good. You want to do things like that just to clean it up so you don't have too many. If you don't care, you're going to have a lot of plants. But just things like that you want to pay attention to. So weeding, do all your weeding, get that cleared out, because what you need to do is prep the beds, and we're going to talk about it in a second. But also take out any plants that reseeded themselves if you don't want all those extras in your garden beds. Refilling your beds. I like to refill my beds in the fall. Some people wait till the spring and refill their beds up. These are grow bags. I've been using grow bags, pots, raised beds, and in-ground this year. And the reason why I like to do it in the fall is because then it's done. When the springtime comes around, there's minimal work that I have to do. If I have to add anything down, it's just a little bit, but I'm able to fill my raised beds all the way to the top, and it just makes it a lot easier. That's just my personal opinion. Plus, it really gives the soil and the microbes time to really break down anything that needs to be broken down further. It really becomes embedded with the structure of the soil that's already there. It just really blends into it together over the time. And then I top off my raised beds fully as a protective barrier with leaves, with dried leaves. That's what I do. And it really does really well for the soil that's in there. And then in the spring, I just pull it back. So that is something that I would recommend to anyone. If you don't want to fool with that in the spring and you really want to protect your soil, you want to keep it covered at some point. Even if it snows, I know it's going to snow, and snow is also a protective barrier. But you want to have something over that soil so that it is not just exposed to the elements, it's not drying out, it's not losing any of its nutrients or the goodness that's in it from the elements in the air or wherever, or the rain and the runoffs, whatever can happen to it. You want to protect your soil. Fill it back up in the fall if you're able to, and add a layer of leaves or mulch or something like that that will protect it. Another thing to do is, as you're filling it back up, get your soil tested. That is really important. You want to know what your soil needs. Your soil may not need any more compost as you're filling it back up. It may not need that. Your soil may need a certain, I don't know, amount of maybe calcium, maybe it's lacking a certain nutrients, and maybe your soil has been too acidic or too much alkaline, and you need to balance the levels because of certain plants that you may be planting. Maybe you're planting tomatoes and your soil needed to be a little bit more acidic, or maybe you're planting blueberry plants like I am and it needs to be very acidic. And so you want to test your soil, or at least figure out like where the levels are with it. Try to work on maybe adding something in it to amend it to balance it back out. Speak with maybe your county extension office. If you're living in the United States, we have county extension office. If you're not in the United States and you're in another part of the world or countries, then speak with a local maybe farmers market, garden centers. They can properly advise you on where you could go to get your soil tested and find out what are some of the things you need to amend it. But that is something that you can take care in the spring, because with some things you need to do it a couple of months in advance or a month in advance. And if you just wait till the spring you test it, you may not be able to really see the benefits of what you amended it, because it takes time to break down and to really mend. So just something just to keep in mind right now as you're preparing for the winter is how you're going to amend your soil if it is lacking in certain things. Foraging. You may be foraging on your own property. This persimmon tree was already here when we moved here, but you may have black walnuts, acorns, American persimmon tree, or maybe an Asian persimmon, or you may be even harvesting and foraging in forestry areas outside of your property, because not everybody has that. Squirrels. Oh my gosh. They are probably coming from the black walnuts. I'm going to beat them to it. But anyways, so on this tree, American persimmon, you want to make sure that it is ready to eat. If not, you will be very disappointed, because it could be extremely astringent. Let me show you for an example. You want to wait till it has its first frost, but sometimes some of them are already ready. So let me show you, for example. This one, I'm squeezing it. It is not ready. If I were to bite into this, it would dry my mouth out like I've never been dried out before. Terrible. It's horrible. It's the worst experience, trust me. Now this one is way past due, as you can see, the color, but it is still soft. I might bite in just part of it, but not too good. Now this one's soft. This one's kind of like, kind of iffy. I like to wait to eat my American persimmons basically when it reaches after Thanksgiving, let's see, end of November, December, when it's really freezing, because then that's when they're just falling off the tree. All right, let me try this. This one, very sweet. That's good. Oh well. The seeds, you can save them. Now this one, I'm hoping this one's okay. Okay. If it's astringent, ugh. That is so sweet. That one's good. That one's good. Let me tell you. I never want to eat an astringent persimmon again. That's so good. So get ready to start harvesting and foraging. And if you're, why is my daughter laughing in the background? So get ready to start foraging and harvesting your trees that can be. Let's go. Black walnuts. And as you can see, there are none. There are none on the ground. Last year, I harvested hundreds of black walnuts. Hundreds for the past 2 to 3 years. But here's what I noticed. There are seasons where the trees will produce a lot of nuts, a lot of black walnuts, and then there's a resting year. And this must be the resting year. So what does that mean? I'm going to have to find a different forest, maybe a park or somewhere where I see black walnuts, or maybe someone's backyard where they're like, what is this? I don't want this in my backyard. And so I can't show you any black walnuts right now. I'll show you a picture, or click on a link and you can watch a video on how I harvest black walnuts. But I will make a video for you. I'll just have to go someplace else to find it, because I have none in my backyard. Taking care of young trees. I planted 4 pawpaw trees last year, but they are still very vulnerable. If you have young trees that you planted, you want to put a protective barrier around it so that maybe the squirrels deer, different animals are not getting to it and chewing on it, even rabbits and chewing on the bark of it. These are pawpaw trees. They're not producing fruit. They'll take about 6 years before they start producing fruit. They'll grow very large. They'll provide a ton of food for our family, but you want to make sure that you are protecting them. So I have put, as you can see, barrier around it, staked it. I attached strings to help the trees from blowing around everywhere. So they're pretty well protected. I just hope the deer don't stick their big heads all the way in here and eat off the tops. But anyways, they're protected to the best that I feel that I can do. So another thing, you want to protect any of your young trees. And it's just so sad to work so hard on trees like this, and then they're destroyed by, you know, by nature that is enjoying it, because you want to be able to reap the harvest of your hard work. All right, next, let's go to the sweet potatoes. Over here, we've got sweet potatoes. I know I have sweet potatoes in here that are ready to harvest. I can tell that it's ready to harvest because the leaves are really starting to die back. In my area, this is fall. The weather's changing. So we've had some cold days. It's very cold at nighttime or in the mornings time. So it's starting to die back. I'm also seeing, come take a look at this. I'm seeing the tops of the sweet potatoes starting to pop up. I see things like that. So I know that these sweet potatoes are ready. Plus they've been in here for approximately over 120 days. And it takes sweet potatoes about, and pretty much any potatoes, about 90 to 120 days till it's time to harvest. I even have, and I'm gonna harvest them today, but I even have some sweet potatoes in ground here as well. This was my experiment for the first time. So that's gonna be interesting to dig up. I put a lot of compost in here because I have clay soil and it's really difficult to maneuver through that. So that will be interesting digging that up. But I do notice that the squirrels, no, the rabbits came and just continually ate off the tops of the greens. You can harvest the greens, the leaves, and you can eat them. They're really, actually really good for cooking. So I'm gonna do all of that today. But in ground, and in this complete whole area, you can see that I have other fruit trees, young fruit trees like I was talking about. I have two pear fruit trees, mulberries that are growing, and even a passion fruit that is growing. But this year was an experiment for right in here. My plan and purpose of this area was to keep it protected from growing weeds around the trees that I had planted. And so what I did is I layered a thick layer of mulch, and a thick layer of compost that's underneath it to just help. The mulch will break down. It will be beautiful. And then in the spring, I'm going to add in another layer of mulch. And then to also help with just utilizing the space more efficiently, that's where I was planting sweet potatoes, different herbs. This oregano will grow so that it also prevents some of the weeds from growing. The competition, slow the competition down. You'll see different flowers that I have growing around here, and even little watermelons. I had really large watermelons, and then these baby ones started popping up. That's why they're being protected here. But watermelons. And that's basically it for this area. It's been a very exciting journey, but I've enjoyed it tremendously. Fall is a great time to start your composting. I have 2 composting bins, and I actually have a third one that I took down. It's empty and I need to refill it up. This is a great time to start to save those dry leaves that are falling and dropping them in here. And when you cut grass, there's only if you're in my kind of growing season where you really have a true fall and a true winter, you're gonna have the leaves dropping. Save those leaves as much as you can. Mix them in, because that will be your brown material. If you want a full video on composting and how to get started, I have that there. But I just want to make a point that composting is a really great time to get started in the fall. And then it will be ready maybe for the spring if you let it go throughout the winter months, or maybe you have time to be able to turn it, decompose, and it's ready to add into your fall winter garden as you're topping it up and getting your beds to go to sleep for the winter. But definitely, if you have not thought about composting, it's a really great way to save on recycling materials, you know, paper or cardboard, food scraps, just different things. You can even compost t-shirts from what I've heard. I haven't done that yet because I wear all my t-shirts. but it's a really great way to add nutrients back into your garden and into your raised beds, and your plants will love it too. I really hope you enjoyed this garden tour and the few little nuggets of tips that I was able to give you throughout this tour. I have really enjoyed my time growing this season and spending my time with you, leafies. I've enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope there was something that you were able to take away today. If you have not subscribed to this channel, please do so. If you are not watching these videos, watch them, because it really helps my channel out if there are views when you're viewing it, especially if you have subscribed, because I'm making these videos specifically for you. But remember to grow, eat, and self-care, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.